Hey, thanks so much for sharing. I was trying to start recording this session so we can all have access to it on our YouTube channel later on. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Ellen. If you can hear me, please drop an emoji because I'm about to ah kick off the session with introducing Ryan. Right. So if you can hear me, please drop an emoji. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, today's section is going to be about leveraging data to drive product decisions. And here we have Ryan Zahra, who is a product manager at MoneyPoint. So I would go into telling us about him. And please, once I'm done, I want us to, welcome him with as many or as much emojis as we can. So yes, thank you. So I'll just dive right in. So here we have Ryan, who is a product manager at MoneyPoint. Ryan is an experienced professional with over a decade in the IT industry, specializing in software development and product management. He's currently a product manager at MoneyPoint Group and the co-founder of Magilla Technology. Throughout his career, Ryan has held various leadership positions, including head of software development at Island Properties, product manager at Moneybase, and senior software developer and team leader at Betsoon. So his skills include software product management, startup leadership, and a range of technical proficiencies such as C and NetCore. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from University of Hertfordshire. With the loudest emojis, let's welcome Ryan on board. Let's welcome Ryan on board. Hello, Ryan. Good evening. Okay, you're welcome. You have the floor.
Hi everyone, and good evening. Thanks a lot for the warm welcome. How's it going? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, very good, very good. All right, good evening everyone. Today I'll be showing a small presentation regarding how we can leverage data to drive product decisions. I will be sharing my screen and let me know if you can see it, please. Can you see my screen, please?
Not yet. Okay. Yes, 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 yes.
All right, very good, very good. So this evening, I want to go through some details of how we're leveraging data, how we're getting the information, and I'm very excited to also show real examples, real life examples that I've been through. Something which we also developed at MoneyPoint, which is definitely helping out the company moving forward. When we talk about a product manager, what's the superpower? The superpower is data. Every product manager has a toolkit, but data is the superpower. Why? It's the only thing, it's the one big thing which allows us to see beyond assumptions. We cannot just work on assumptions. We need to have real data, real information of why we're gonna need to work on a feature, why we're gonna need to make an improvement, and where such an improvement needs to be done. In our time today, we'll explore why data is critical, how it fits into the product life cycle, and I'll walk you through real-world examples from my own experience. And finally, we'll also talk about how you can start to build this skill set yourself. Building the products in the real world. Let's think back about a product manager who goes through someone speaking, someone discussing, saying this feature, what let's work on this feature. Why? Because I think customers will love it. Or you can also hear someone saying, our competitor launched this feature, let's do the same because we need to compete. But these kind of statements, while they are very well intentioned, are always based on assumptions. It's not the numbers, it's not the data that's telling us we need to build this feature. But while building these features might be a good thing with a good intention, we might be wasting valuable resources. Why? Because data-driven decisions, on the other hand, are grounded in reality. When we compare the data and say we launched a specific feature, we can say there's a 20% drop in user engagement, or there's an improvement in the engagement, or we've seen a spike in support tickets about this specific issue. Data isn't guesswork. Data provides us where the decisions are being taken. It provides us with a clear path on how to move forward. Just taking a small sidestep here. If anyone has any question, please feel free to raise your hand. I will stop and hear out anything or any feedback. All right, moving on. What's the data's role at every stage here? So data isn't something you look at after a product is launched. All right, it's an integral part of every single stage of the product life cycle. So you start with data, you start with checking what your users, what your customers really want. And that's the discovery phase. In the discovery phase, we are using data from market research, user interviews. We're also doing A/B testing with our initial designs to see which designs or features perform best. So we are literally going to the ground, we're going in the streets, we're asking people, we're asking customers, which do you think or which do you see as a best feature? Or if we're looking at something specific, which way would a user interact better with said feature, with said functionality? That's where you start, because there you already get a very good idea of which feature or which UI, which UX is going to hit the ground running. It's not guesswork. We're getting information. We're doing these interviews to get this information. But that's only the first part. After we launch, we still need to constantly monitor for performance. We still need to collect feedback and identify opportunities. And in a growth stage, we're still doing deep dives into user behavior to refine the product even further. What are we saying here? We need to know where the users are clicking, where the users are going, what's the user journey, where are the people going, how long are they taking to reach a specific area, is the user being blocked? And that's the information, that's the data we're going to need to require in order to be able to improve our product. And that's why data is powering every step of the whole product life cycle. Let's see how we're going to get this data. There's two ways, the what and the why. When we talk about data, it's easy to get lost in numbers. However, it's crucial to understand that there are two types, and you need both in order to get the full picture. The quantitative data is telling you what happened. These are the numbers you can get, like the number of clicks, time spent on something. It's the hard numbers, like getting a better picture in terms of numbers. And that's something you can get even from the product itself. Like, for example, if you have a dashboard, a specific feature, you know where the user is clicking, you know where the users are going. That's how you'll be able to get the numbers. However, that needs to be matched also with the qualitative data, the why. Why is the user doing this? Why is the user going through a certain flow? And why this is happening? And this is retrieved via feedback from the users, via interviews with your users. Also, going through support tickets. Support tickets is telling you where the user is stuck, why the user is stuck, why can't the user do something with your product. And you need to combine the what and the why, because it will give you the real insights of where the product is headed. It will give you the insights into where the pitfalls are and what you need to improve upon. Let's look at a case study. This is something I've personally worked on at MoneyPoint. If any of you here, can I get a thumbs up who's using MoneyPoint here? Who has a business or a personal account? All right, I can see a few. All right, very good, very good. I'm sure these features are something you're aware of because it's something we've launched earlier this year. Let me give you an example. This case study is what we refer to as the OTP lockout. As some of you surely know, when you're logging in to the MoneyPoint app, you're gonna need to register your device. And when registering your device, you're gonna be receiving an SMS with a one-time password, which is a combination of numbers. Which you need to input into the app in order to be able to access your bank account. However, we've seen a number of customers complaining that they lost their phone, they lost the SIM card, their phone got stolen. What's the problem there? The problem is the user is not able to receive the OTP. Hence, the user is locked. They cannot access their bank account. Of course, this is not just an inconvenience to the user. It's a main friction and a frustration. And worst of all, it's a loss of trust. Because if I, as a user, cannot access my bank account, of course I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to say it's not reliable. So how are we going to look at this problem in order to solve it? So first thing we did, let's look at the data. The quantitative data is we need to look at the numbers. Let's start with the support tickets. We've got a number of support tickets which were saying a user is not able to log in. So what's the process there? Literally myself go through the issues, the support issues being raised, filter them out, see why a customer is complaining, what's the issue to be resolved, and how it would be resolved. That's the quantitative, like how many numbers do it, what's the percentages. When we start seeing an increase in percentage of the same repeated tickets, user cannot log in, that's when it started to ring an alarm like, all right, something is wrong here. Now, we went to the qualitative data. What did we do? We were deep diving more into the real issue of the user. Why is the user reporting the issue? Why is the user feeling frustrated? Of course, once you analyze the why, the user cannot log in, losing trust, that's a huge red flag. That's also a loss of business to my point. So it's definitely something that had to be acted upon and acted upon immediately. So what was the solution at the end of the day? We developed a functionality through which a user would be able to change the phone number without actually logging in. And this functionality would be available on any device. Why? Because even if I don't have device myself, I can borrow someone else's device. I can use the web as well. What was the impact once we launched? The number of complaints drastically decreased. And that's a win. Why? Because we didn't just solve the problem, we built a feature based on data, we improved the customer experience, we reduced the load on our support staff, and the data proved the feature's value. Why? Because post-launch, we were also monitoring the uptake. We were monitoring if there's any pain points, which we did also an improvement over and above the original solution. Because once you start seeing the numbers, once you start seeing the drop-off points, you'll be able to know where the pain points are, why the user is not going through the whole process. And that gives you the full idea of how and why a user is doing what you're seeing. Also, doing interviews with users that helped a lot to know the reasoning behind certain actions being done by our customers. Any questions before I move on? All right. Let's do another example. Another case study where we wanted to secure lost devices. Believe it or not, we've seen an increase and daily increase in a number of devices which were either lost or stolen, which of course is a problem. If I lose my device, if my device got stolen, I want to lock my account in order to be able to make sure my money is not moved out. So how can we make sure to improve there? So one of the main things we wanted to do is to empower the user to be able to make sure the user is not worried about losing money, make sure the user is able to lock their accounts. And if there's an urgent problem, there is a swift and effective solution, both for the user himself to protect himself, also without reaching our support. Why? Because that would also mean an increase in support. It doesn't mean support won't be helping out where needed. They will always be available. But if we can empower the user is feeling more comfortable using our technology. Data for the peace of mind. So what will you do? Again, I've personally gone through the request, the customer support request, and the calls received by support to check what and how much of these tickets we are receiving, how much we're receiving daily, weekly, monthly, and the quantity of it cleared showed us that there's a clear indication for a need to improve upon this process. And the qualitative data showed that users were anxious. And it's understandable. If I'm lose, if I lost my device, I'm worried that my money might not be safe. I'm worried that someone might take my money because they have my device. So that is where we said, all right, we need to make sure the process is safe, and we need to make sure that our users feel safe as well. And that's a very important because user is not feeling safe, he's not going to trust us to hold that money. How did the data-powered security feature work? So the solution is that we launched a feature through which the users are able to lock their account instantly and without logging in. Why without logging in? The reason is simple. Let's say I'm out with my friends, I lost my phone. If I need to make sure that my money is safe, I can use my friend's phone, for example, in order to lock my account. This gives the flexibility to the user to be able to lock the account right away from wherever they are. Of course, once the user then retrieves the phone number or changes their phone number and are able to log in again, the user is then empowered as well in order to unblock their account. What was the impact here? Again, a sharp decrease in complaints, a sharp decrease in support calls related to lost or stolen devices. Again, it's a win. Why? Data showed us where the problem is, how to solve it, and at the end of the day, making sure that our users are given the peace of mind needed. It's a strategic move because you need to always build trust, and trust retains customers. Beyond the metrics. So, as a role for your data driven, what does this mean? Your job is more than just a metric tracker. You need to be a detective. You need to look into the numbers. You need to look into the what. You need to look into the why. Ask why those numbers. Be an advocate for the user. Use the data as evidence. Why are we building these features? We're building feature X because X number of users are having this problem. We're going to advocate for the user in order to be able to improve upon their product. Data is your evidence, and with evidence that a champion to needs to prioritize features that truly matter. It's useless guessing, I think we should do this because competitor is doing it. No, it might not be what your users, what your customers want and need. At the end of the day, you need to be like a storyteller, right? You need to turn the data into a compelling narrative. And that narrative needs to motivate the team and the stakeholders. The mission, your mission, is to transform that raw data, those numbers, those interviews, into a powerful, user-centric product decisions. Because those decisions is affecting the future of the product. So always remember, data is not just a tool you use. It's not something you use occasionally. It's a mindset which you need to adopt every day, every single day. It's the difference between guessing what your customers want versus knowing what they need. And that's how you build products. Customers don't use, but they truly love your product. And once they love your product, that's when you win. Because you need to gain their trust. The customer, you need to win the customer. And that's a roundup for me. I'd love to answer any questions you might have. And feel free to contact me on my email address or on my LinkedIn. Any questions, please? All right. I guess that would be all from my end. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry, I have a question. Good evening. I was trying to raise my hand.
All
Sure.
right. Thank you so much, Mr. Aaron. Thank you so much for such a. Okay, okay. So
All
yeah,
right,
please, in
so
case any other person has a question, you can raise it.
okay, Ryan, thank you so much for this section. My name is Juliet, and I work for a um I work for a company. One of the companies App Global. So for my company, yeah, the scenario in my company is my CEO actually just comes up with features from his head, right? So he has been in the right, and we don't have like a really complete team. So he's basically the one that calls all the shots, right? He's the one that makes the decision, but he doesn't really use data like that. So he understands the business, right? We're into an EMR application. We have an EMR application, an electronic and digital application for hospitals. So basically it's like a B2B. So my challenge is he's the he's the one that calls all the shots, right? He doesn't um he doesn't use data, right, to make decisions. But I mean, with his experience in the business, I don't know if that's a challenge. Do you he's very experienced in the business, so he's very knowledgeable in the field. So does he still need to use data for him to be able to make decisions?
Hi, Juliet. Good evening. All right, so there's two things which you might want to look into. First off, the person you're speaking of is definitely knowledgeable about the business. Being a B2B is slightly different when you are dealing with a whole business. Why? There can be requirements coming directly from your business, right? So it's not, it would be something like, all right, we're going to work on this feature because it was requested by a business, like especially if there's a lot of trade between these businesses, and it would be a must in order to implement that specific feature. On the other hand, you can always use data, all right? Why? Because if you are currently not monitoring how your product is used, that's the first thing you're going to do. That's how you're going to get the information in order to be able to present it and work upon it and work on your story. If you have a feature which is in use, you don't know how much it's being used or which part of the feature is being used or if it's being even used properly. So let's start with the metrics. With the metrics, you're going to get the numbers. You're going to get the what. You're going to get the numbers. After that, you're going to ask the why. That's where you might want to speak directly to your customers, get an idea of how they are using the product and why they are using it in that particular way. Once you get that information, you will be able then to formulate how the product needs to change, how the product can improve to better serve your customer. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, it does.
Helen, I can see your hand raised.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for um, the session. It was very enlightening. So the question I have is when, for example, you have the customer tickets and you're getting feedback from people who are using the app or service, at what point do you take it seriously, or at what point do you know that, okay, this is something that we need to work on? And also, how soon do you get back to these customers? I know obviously you're going to um, respond to them and be like, okay, we would look into this. We're so sorry to hear this and da da da. But how exactly do you like move on from that step?
So, first of all, we have a dedicated team of support that is constantly handling the customer requests, and they are dealt there and then. Once a ticket is raised on customer support, because what we are doing is we are logging each and every customer request, each and every complaint, each and every inquiry coming in. We'll be able to take a list of how many, in terms of numbers, are coming in. Of course, there's going to be different types of requests, and that's when you start to group the request types. What I mean here is if I get 10 tickets in a day, I want to group them. Are there any which are the same complaint? Are there any which can be grouped in such a way that they belong to the same feature, right? Once you're able to group them per day, per week, per month, you start to see a trend. You put the numbers in a graph or even in a simple Excel sheet and see, for example, what type of requests are coming in. Let's say day one, you had an issue, the customer cannot log in. Day two, you had more issues with customers cannot make a transfer. Day three, you get and so on and so forth, right? Once you start seeing numbers, you're going to see a pattern. When that pattern becomes constant, you'll notice where the problem is. If, for example, as I was showing, people couldn't log in, you start seeing an increase in numbers. And that's when you realize, like, all right, I want to tackle those issues which are mostly reported. So if I'm having, I don't know, out of 10 tickets, I'm having 5 tickets every day with people telling me I need to lock my account because I lost my phone or my phone got stolen and I'm afraid, so I need to lock my account. That's where the numbers are telling you, like, all right, something needs to be done here. You cannot ignore it. On the other hand, if you're getting a request for, I cannot change my username, just keep something simple, right? I cannot change my username. You're getting that request once a week. It's obvious where the problem is. The problem is with people that cannot, that needs to log their account. It's not with a problem where the user needs to change their username. So the numbers will definitely show you where the problem is. As you get that percentage, how many people are complaining for what, that will show you the way. Numbers don't lie at the end of the day. That's why it's very, very important to take it seriously. Customer complaints, where they are, what the customer is complaining about, what the customer needs, and that will show you the way. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Abimbola, you can see your hand raised.
Yes, good evening, Ryan. Thank you very much. My question is that if the solution you've implemented doesn't like effectively address the issues or as the user have and the user continue to complain, would you recommend going back to the drawing board to develop a new solution, or should we be focusing on improving the
Maybe, let me come down back to you. Come on, down.
hello?
The cake now. My father was silence.
Apama, please.
Sorry.
Let me this one.
Hello? Hello?
Sorry about
All
that.
right,
You can continue.
you can continue.
Oh, okay. So I was asking if the solution we implemented doesn't effectively address the issue or concerns of the user, and the user continue to complain, would you recommend going back to the drawing board to develop a new solution, or should we like focus on improving the existing solution, especially considering that the user are already feeling anxious? That's my question.
Very good question there. And I can see why you're asking. So let's consider a scenario. We have a user that lost their phone, just to keep an example here, right? And they want to lock their account. We do our research, we launch a new feature, but the complaints remain the same. So something definitely is not working here. Now, the question you need to ask is why this is not working. First thing I would do personally is I would go directly to the support tickets and see the complaints. I would also be, for example, asking people that are complaining, like, all right, I want to block my account. Why didn't you use our feature? And that will get you the why, right? The, if the customer is telling you, then it's too complicated. I don't know where the feature is. You will start to get the idea of how to improve already. That's getting the why. You can also start looking at the numbers. You have your feature available. How many people are actually using it? If before we launched the feature, we had 10 people complaining, and after we launched the feature, there are 9 people complaining, you know that only one person was able to make use of the feature successfully. What happened to the other 9? Could be a question of discoverability. It could be a question of user experience. It could be a question of not being communicated properly to the user as well. So there's a lot of things which need to be looked into. It's not a straightforward answer. The way you need to look at it is, I want to know why. And it's not something I can answer directly, the why, because I worked on it. So I need to go out there, ask my customers, like, why aren't you using the feature? And you will get an idea right away. Like, for example, we had something similar happening where we saw people started to use a feature, but they dropped off. And from the numbers, you will see, like, we create funnels through which we see the user journey. Like, there's 3, 4, 5 steps to be done by the user, and say the user is stopping after the second step. Why? Then you, for example, might see it's an engineering issue. You have a problem that needs to be fixed. It might be also the user is finding it hard to move on to the next step. Why? Could be a design issue. Could be the steps are not explained correctly to the user. Once you have all that information, once you better know the numbers, once you know better the why users are failing at those steps and at which specific step, you will be able to know if you can improve upon what you have or if you want to start over. And from experience, most probably it's a question of the user not being comfortable using a feature or not being fully aware, or the user dropping off at some point due to a particular step which might not be clear to the user. So it's not always start over. And I would hold back from saying start over, because realistically, you should have already done the homework where you got the numbers, where you got the why people need that feature. So if the initial work was done, if the initial work was driven by data, driven by numbers, driven by the why, you need to trust that data and work on the solution. Now, if the solution is not optimized, that's where then you would need to keep optimizing. That's where the growth happens. That's when the user engagement improves. And that's how you're going to tweak it in order to improve forward. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. Telema, I see your hand raised. Right. The user dropped off. Helen?
Hello, can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Ryan. Good evening. So I thought I was unmuted. Okay, so aside receiving, getting customer complaints and trying to fix, whatever issues they're having, I believe there's also room to, receiving feature requests from customers, right? Maybe they have a problem with how a certain design is, or maybe how something works, and they feel like it should work a different way or something. How do we manage that as product managers? Because of course, those features, like let's say we have like numerous people coming up with like different feature requests and all that. So how do we manage it?
All right. Users will always come up with ideas, and users will always come up with requests, right? So it's going to be in your decision, in your power to say, all right, if this makes sense or if this is a want or a need. You need to distinguish between the two, and you need to make sure whatever is being suggested by the user really works for what you need. Why am I saying so? If myself comes up to you, tell you, all right, for your product, I would need this specific feature. As a product manager, you would need to say, does this make sense? Is it something that fits within our roadmap? Is it something that other customers are requesting? How many customers will be impacted? You need to evaluate the idea, right? It's always very important to evaluate the idea. It's good to have discussions around these things, and it's good to bounce ideas with different people as well. But the end of the day, you need to also consider if that specific feature which the customer is requiring, how it will really improve your product. How many people will be affected? How many people really need that specific feature, and why do they need it? How will it improve the product? How will it improve the customer base? Because let's say you have 100 customers and only one customer is requiring this feature. So this is like a 1% of the customers requiring that feature. However, if you have 10 customers and 2 people are requesting it, that's a 20% request. So that would be something more you might need to look into because there's a bigger demand for it. It's always good to get the numbers because once you have the numbers in front of you, it gives you a better picture, it gives you a clearer picture of how much something is really required. Once you get the numbers, once you get the quantity, you need to get the why. Is it really needed? What else is going to be stopped in order to work on that feature? Let's say you're working, I don't know, something security related, for example. Which one are you going to give priority? Security always comes first. But that feature might be needed, might not be doing it in Q2, might be doing it in Q3 or Q4. Depends on where this specific feature is going to fall within your roadmap. Because always keep in mind, in order to do feature A, you won't be doing feature B, and you won't be doing feature C. So it's always a balance between what's needed and what should be done. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I can see Helen with your raised hand.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is a bit outside of the topic that you focused on today, which is basically data, qualitative and quantitative. Like, which frameworks do you decide, or do you decide to use based on the different stages of the product's life cycle? You know,
All
there's
right,
right,
so
Ano, there's Moscow. So, like, how do you know which framework matters most in terms of, you know, prioritization?
so it's gonna depend also not just the product per se, but it also involves the team. You need to make sure all your team members are working in harmony, right? So when you're leading the team, for example, if I take a look at what my team looks like, I have engineers which are working on the back end, I have engineers working on the front end, I have engineers working on the web and on the phone. I have a design team, I also have a QA team, and apart from that, there's other teams which are dependent on me and which I depend on. And different teams might be working with different ideas, with different frameworks. It's more a question of making sure whatever you choose is the best tool for what you have. At the end of the day, many times you end up coming to a situation where you start with working with Agile and end up working with a waterfall. It's a combination. It's always a combination. And I'm finding myself in a situation also where you're working on a feature and that feature is going to go Agile. You're working on feature B and that's going to go waterfall. It's not always the same. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that harmony within the team is the most important thing because if everyone is on board, the product will move forward. You don't want all of these rules, all of these ideas to actually hinder progress. You want to make it as simple as possible for everything to move forward. So I cannot give you a direct answer to whether you use this or use that. All of them have their positives, all of them have their negatives. It's always a decision between what's best for the team versus adhering to rigid structures. It's important to have a structure, don't get me wrong, but not at the cost of the team, not at the cost of the team suffering in order to adhere to specific rules. Let's put it this way.
Mm,
Does it make sense?
okay. Okay, I think that makes sense. So my second question is, like, how do you balance building for like the customer's needs versus like the company vision long term?
That's the hardest part of the job, I would say, because it's always important to of course, meeting the criteria for the quarter, for the term, for the year of the company, and also keeping your customers happy. In a way, the balance you would find it because if you're seeing, for example, an increase in customer complaints on a certain area, it's clear that that needs to be tackled. It's going to affect the customer and it's going to affect also the baseline of the company. But you will also have instances where, for example, regulations change. That's not negotiable. You need to, of course, adhere to the regulations. It's not the first time that we get a law change, a new law coming directly from the Central Bank of Nigeria saying, this is the new rule. We need to make sure we adhere to it. If you're not adhering to that rule, your business is going to close down because you're not moving according to the law. So that's always something to be aware of. Again, I cannot tell you use this or use that. It's on a case-by-case basis, as I'm saying. If you're seeing users, I'm a banking app, and I don't have a transfer functionality, the customer is going to come tell me, of course, I need to transfer money. So that's, of course, giving priority. It's going to improve the product. But if my legal framework is telling me, unless you do this particular feature, for example, unless you collect customer information and it's correct customer information, you cannot even open a bank account for that person. So, of course, I need to abide by the law before I'm actually able to onboard new users, new customers to my product. So it's a very delicate line. It's not a straightforward line. It's not a straightforward answer. You need to always weigh whatever you have on your plate at the moment. And at times it's not easy. But what's important is to always ask the why and the how. Why? Because if you see, let's say we need a new feature and we also need to adhere to a new law. Adhering to the new law is, of course, top priority. But working on that feature, let's say it's a small feature, it's a minor feature, you can always try to do that in parallel, for example. Again, it's always going to depend on what kind of feature we're talking about. Sometimes you can juggle. You can juggle 2, 3 features even. I've been through that. But at what cost then? Like, for example, sometimes we're saying, all right, we need to adhere to this new law, but at the same time, we have this feature which is halfway through, and we need to make sure we take it, we give it the extra push. Sometimes team members move around. Sometimes you get help from different teams in order to help give that extra effort. Sometimes also we say, all right, this feature needs to stop until we adhere to the law and something gets deprioritized. And then it's always negotiations, of course, with my top managers, C-level. But what is always important is you understand the what and the why. Because once you have clarity on what needs to be done, then it becomes clear, not just to you, even to your peers, even to your managers, it will become very clear. I hope that gives you a better clarity on how our day-to-day job is.
Okay, but just one more question. So
Sure.
what's like a common mistake that a product manager can make when trying to prioritize those features based on the data that they have?
What's a common mistake? All right, sometimes you might be rushing a feature over another. Let me give you an example. I'm working, let's say, on feature A, and I also know that I have a deadline for feature B. That comes with saying, all right, I need to quickly finish A in order to start and finish B because the deadline for feature B is getting pressing. So where do you cut the line? It's not straightforward again. But one of the things that even sometimes I find myself doing is say, all right, the team is working on A. Let's make sure to finish feature A because the team is still fully hands-on on that. And the team is focused on it. And you deprioritize B. The deadline won't be moved. and feature B still needs to get started. What I'm trying to explain here is sometimes the team needs to move from one feature to another, from one fix to another, from one engineering process to another. And what you always need to keep in mind is if I stop feature A, how will it impact my customers? How will it impact the company? If I deprioritize feature B, what's the impact? So it's very important that before taking an action, you always know why and the repercussions. Because once the repercussions are clear, once you communicate those repercussions also, that becomes a bit clearer of why one thing is taking over the other. And the mistake there would be the communication. If it's not clear, if you're not communicating clearly to your team, to your peers, to your superiors, it's very, very important. Because if there's no clarity, if there's no reasoning behind the actions you're taking, that's going to be a problem. So it's always important to give give the clarity of why you're still working on feature A and haven't started on feature B. And I've seen this not just money point, I've seen this in a lot of companies. But once the communication is there, it becomes a lot clearer. I hope that's clear.
Could that be the reason why there's this like stigma around product managers and why like the rest of the team hate them because of the lack
Yes, I would say yes. Actually, I would say yes because it's always fingers pointed at the product manager. Let's put it this way. And the reality is, if the engineer comes and tell you, because Ryan told me to do that and not the other, then you have to answer for it. So it's from my perspective, I always try to be as clear as possible. I always make sure to communicate why we're doing feature A, why we are not doing feature B. Because what happens on a day-to-day basis, and I see this a lot, you get a lot of people working within your team. They know the product, they're working on it. An engineer comes like, hey, Ray, listen, we found, I don't know, we found an issue on this specific area. Can we spend the day to fix it? Like, no, we have feature A to deliver. I know that is a problem. I know we need to fix it, but not now. And that's, of course, where fingers get pointed. But if there's reasoning behind it, if there is the know-how, if there is the why we're pausing something to do another, it becomes clear. Clarity is very important. The team needs to be on board with whatever you're doing. Because if you're not working in the same flow, that's a problem. You might be pulling different ropes. You're not pulling on the same rope to pull out the same feature. Is that clear? Very good. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay. Favor, back to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Ryan, for such a wonderful session. Okay, yeah, so we're at the end of the session now. Yeah, this session is brought to you by Enoverlab. Enoverlab is a product management institute here in Nigeria, and we are looking into spreading our wings into other African countries in the nearest future. So, yes, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on today's product session. Such an insightful one. Thank you so much, Ryan, for spending your Saturday night with us here at Enoverlab. And yeah, this is a session we do have every fortnight at Enoverlab. You can same link, so you can join anytime, 7 p.m. on Saturdays. You can join us for an exciting session about product management and the product space generally. So yeah, please let's goodbyes and yeah. I hope you do enjoy the rest of the weekend.